You're listening to the Topco Business Unusual podcast. Now, the Business Unusual podcast. Learn from the greatest minds in business today. Interviews hosted by Ralf Fletcher. Learn how to improve business, get tips from industry leaders, and be motivated by real-life experience. Topco Business Unusual.
Welcome to this week's edition of Topco Business Unusual podcast. Today I'm joined by two very special guests from Mentally Fit, Luc van der Hofstadt. I think I said that right, Luc. And James Thompson. So I'm not sure who to introduce first, but Luc, you were one of the founders of Mentally Fit over 20 years ago, and James is obviously a celebrated Olympic gold medalist for rowing. So welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Ralf. Yeah, it's awesome to be with you and all the listeners to unpack a little bit about sport and business.
Cool, man. So I'd imagine you're both in South Africa. I'm in sunny Cape Town. Where are you guys?
I'm lucky to be in sunny Cape Town, in sunny Hout Bay, in the suburbs of Cape Town.
I lived there for 20 years.
Yeah, so I am originally Cape Town based, but now I live up in Johannesburg. So I'm based up in our offices up here.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, just for everybody listening to this podcast, we're obviously going to get into the coaching side of the things and professional sports, and how do we apply some of the coaching, I suppose, tips from professional sport into business, because I think it's a well covered point. But just to go through some of your background, maybe starting with you, Luc, just a little bit about your background and sort of what got you to this point.
Yes, so I have an atypical background. You first hear it in my accent. I'm not South African. I'm originally from Belgium, but it's been 8 years that I'm in South Africa now, and I feel even more South African having my permanent residence now. And I supported, of course, the Boks yesterday. Not that I would support Belgium in rugby because they're not there. But my background, I have a master's in law that I never used. And after having finished my master's in law, my first job was to work as a water ski instructor, which made my parents really happy having my law degree and being a water ski instructor. But Ralf, you see, I was always attracted to sports, and I've been practicing sports. I still practice, my arms still feel it. I started water skiing this weekend. But more important, the sports coaching is what brought me to Mentally Fit and to mix sports metaphors into business coaching. As you said, we started an organization more than 20 years ago in Belgium, Mentally Fit, and we are now in about 20 countries all over the world. And I'm in charge of developing the Mentally Fit corporate business coaching on the African continent. So that's my background, and happy to be in South Africa now.
But Luc, you also had some background in sport as well, in coaching sports teams. It's not just business and coaching. Do you want to talk about that quickly?
What we do, James and I, so we apply sports metaphors into business coaching. So our job is to be business coaching. Our passion and our laboratory is sports coaching. So when I was still in Belgium, we worked a lot with sports teams, i.e. also the Belgian national hockey team, which from Beijing, we took them from participation culture, happy to be at the Olympics, to Tokyo Olympics, where they finally won gold. So that team went from silo culture to participation culture to performance culture, wanting a medal, to winning culture. And so we use this, Ralf, in businesses also, asking, where are you? Are you just happy to be one of the people in your area, or are you in performance culture? You want a medal? Are you in winning culture? Or we work often also with companies. Do you want to be in the legacy culture? So the hockey was part of our work in South Africa. I did some work with the Springbok Sevens. I worked with the Ike Tigers, University of Cape Town rugby. And so, but just to make it clear, so sports is our inspiration, but it's not our job. That's not what brings bread and butter on the table, but we are inspired. Our DNA is full of sports. Of course, James has another insights in sports there.
James, the gold medalist for rowing. Is it easy?
Rowing is most certainly not easy.
It's probably why I don't do it.
Yeah, 6 minute effort is what we're generally about, and it's
6 minutes.
Tricky. 6 minutes. It's a particularly difficult or tricky time frame, right? So it's sort of a 400 on an 800 on steroids, right? It's more like a 1500 meter effort is roughly where you're at. A little bit longer than a 1500, but it's a full body. So yeah, it's very, very demanding physically, but at the same time, it's like threading a needle. You got to be able to be pinpoint accuracy while you're doing it. So it's not a natural movement, and it's something that really has to be trained and learned. No one naturally rows incredibly well, which is what obviously it lends itself to being coached a huge amount. And all great rowers are accompanied by great coaches, which is really the foundation. Yeah, I had 15 years of being coached to the highest level, which is obviously why a lot of what Mentally Fit's all about is their coaching and bringing those lessons across. Yeah.
So, I mean, the Olympics gold that you won was that what 15 years ago, or how long ago was that?
15 years as a professional athlete. Now, it's scary to say it's 11 years ago, so it was 2012. It feels like just the other day, but that's because I continued to row afterwards. So my retirement was only 2016, but we won Olympic gold in 2012. But I had a really long career I rowed professionally at school quite early. I became dedicated to rowing. I stopped all other school sports. Whether that's a good or bad thing is another discussion altogether. But in standard 8 or grade 10 is when I was full-time dedicated to rowing 12 months of the year. So I had a fairly long run at it, but I was privileged along the way to be involved in some of the best teams through that system that we helped develop. Yeah.
And so, what do you think the relationship is between rowing and the coaching of teams and businesses? Is there a relationship there? Yeah.
So I came out of sport and into the business world. Between 2012, we started getting in 2016, we got a lot of exposure into the business world through keynote speaking. And then I got involved in some corporates the year after that, after 2016, and some small business. And I'm just blown away by how little coaching there is and mentorship there is. Every great athlete, every great tennis player, they say, oh, he's changed coaches and look how he's done really well. Even the golfers, they change a fitness coach and now they're 10 kilos fitter. I think of the French golfer who's dropped a whole lot of weight and become more muscular or whatever. And it's amazing how these coaches play an incredibly influential role in their development as their performance. Whereas in corporate, you've got your boss, and your boss isn't your coach. Coach is a very different role to a boss, and it's something that really surprised me. I had amazing mentors and coaches through my whole rowing career, and the business world often neglects it, or it's an additional. It's an added extra. Whereas I see it as a fundamental. And my time in corporate, I learned a huge amount about the hollowness of that mentorship and coaching space. And it's one of the things that has attracted me to Mentally Fit is obviously they use the sports theme, but ultimately they're training and a coaching business. And that's what I feel the business world really needs. Why don't we say when we speak about our best CEOs in the country, Whitey Basson, he's coached by X. The ego is too big to have someone coach you. I don't know. Maybe in that example it is, but the other one is not. So I think we all need a coach, even me. We all need a coach, and we need someone to guide us through this business world that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, Luke, I want to ask you a question in a second, but you talk around being coached to Olympic success. What did you find from the coach, or what were the attributes that you found from that coach that helped you, that you look for other coaches?
So I've had the pleasure of 15 years, only 5 coaches. So it's quite tight. But at the Olympic Games, I had 3 of those coaches present with me.
Sure.
So it's not a single one size fits all,
Yeah.
Maybe it's arguable to say one of those coaches was the boss and 2 of them were coaches in the corporate view of it, right? So yeah, they were all tagged coach, but one was the boss and 2 were coaches. They were both very good at, one was incredibly good at the team dynamic and making sure all the players were on the same page. And as a group, we understood our roles in the team. And he came out of corporate, right? He was a CEO of a finance company running out of Joburg CBD, running the regenesis of Joburg. But he was incredibly, his name was Paul Jackson, incredibly good with the human EQ side of it, getting us all on the same page. We often talk about our one pager and team alignment and making fit, and he was good. When I look back at it, that's what he was really good at. And then Dustin Butler, who was with us all the way through to London, technically, he knew what needed to happen, and technically the rowing movement, he was just phenomenal at. So we look for different things, right? At different times of our career and different times of our team, we need different things. And if we're being coached, why would we have one coach? Mentally Fit South Africa, we have 3 coaches locally. Around the world, Luke will know the number better than me. And how many coaches have we got, Luke?
About 100.
Sure.
About 100, right? And different coaches are going to be useful to your team and to your players at different times. So every coach has a different skill, and it's about having a click and knowing what you are looking to improve and getting a coach to help you along that journey.
Wow. Thanks, James. So I mean, Luke, the role for coaching in business, I mean, how important is that right now?
So just to complement on what James was saying, the coach helps to improve. So often how it works when you're looking for a business coach, Ralf, if you would look for a business coach, you probably would interview a couple of coaches and see which one there's a good click and there's a good fix. When they interview us, the coaches at Mentally Fit South Africa, we always say, if you look for the nice coach that's going to say, Ralf, you're the best and the greatest, don't choose for us, because we as coaches need to be agents of discomfort for our coaches, because you can only grow if you get out of your comfort zone. There is no growth, no development without discomfort. When James was rowing, he was always pushing his limits, not to the red zone because he would injure himself, but the orange zone, the development zone. So if I want to grow, I need to step out of my comfort zone. So we often say, if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a leader. Sell ice cream. I mean, ice cream people, they make my daughters very happy, and myself, I love ice cream also, but it's their job. As a leader, you are not there to make people happy. You are there to help the people to perform better. And so if they perform better, the team will perform better and the company will reach its goals. So that's what it's all about. So leaders are also coaches. So get the people out of their comfort zone. But the most important next to that, Ralf, is give the people a why. So leaders, coaches now, please clarify, always clarify, why will I get you out of the comfort zone? And the why is so you can grow, the team can grow, and the company can grow, and we can reach our goals. I was in an intake this morning for a team coaching that I'm going to do with a company. and they are growing exponentially. But you maybe know the S curve where you get to the fat and happy stage. Hey guys, everything is going good. And me as a leader, it's all about me. And that's the danger, because then you're going to go down. So this person is clever enough to say, hey, I need to be careful not to get there. And so he's looking for coaching for himself and coaching for his team to make sure that we're aligned on where we want to go. We say what got you here will not get you there. If you continue doing the same, if James had continued doing the same over his rowing career, he wouldn't have reached goal. So, I mean, if the Boks had played like in 2019, I think they would never even reach the quarterfinal. Their game, for what I know from rugby, but their game is very different to what they played in 2019. Why? Because all the other teams have been growing. So if South Africa didn't get out of his comfort zone, they wouldn't have had this great victory yesterday against France.
I mean, do you think that's because of good coaching or good talent?
It's a mix of both. But if we look at last World Cup, Ralf, do you think Rassie had about 18 months? Can he make them technically much stronger in 18 months? Can he make them physically much stronger? Question mark. So Rassie worked on team cohesion, on giving sense. Guy, why are we doing what we do? And that's where he worked. And of course, he's got great talent. When you see, Ralf, what came from the bench, I think it increased the level. And so he's got this big pool of talent, but he doesn't need to teach them how to play rugby. They all play in the best clubs. Okay, he needs to work on this team cohesion, working for the team. So often in sports, we say, don't be the best of the team, be the best for the team. And I think in South Africa, they all have the pride of their badge, the proud of the Springboks. And I think next to great talent, that's what makes them a great team.
Yeah, certainly was a great performance over the last, couple of games, but certainly last night as well. And it's from other teams as well. I mean, even the Fijians played well, eh? I mean, you got these teams that were nowhere, and suddenly, is that leadership, James, that the Fijians did so well? Because I think it's well known that South Africa does well because of Rassie. He's sort of bringing people together, right?
Yeah, I think Rassie is a great leader of the team, and I just think he's even brought a great coaching team together, right? He stepped aside as an element of it. Well, has he stepped aside? Was he just
I saw him in the box.
But there's some title shuffling going on there. But he's been amazing at building a team of coaches and then building a team. And just to reiterate Luke's point, heard a quote come out of Sia last night, and he just fell into the answer of why. Right? Someone asked him a question about how the match went, and his answer was pretty much why they were there, who they were playing for, why they got out of bed in the morning, right? And it's so succinct, and it's so part of their everyday life. And it wasn't very short because he played for a lot of people and a lot of reasons. It was very fluid to him, and I think that's just amazing. And it just shows every high performance team I've been involved in has had an amazing why. Has a very clear, it doesn't have to be rocket science, it doesn't have to be hugely different, but they've taken the time and they've had a facilitated session around developing this why, and then it's bought into by everyone, and then it has to flow through the layers, and everybody has to work out what piece of the puzzle they play of the why. So I think Rassie's done an amazing job, like Luke says. Like he couldn't actually. I don't think you've got bigger players, right? You've got better players than they used to have, but they've got a very cohesive team, and they can interchange players. And you captain and you get pulled off. There's no ego there, right? So I'm out. You're in. Someone else take the baton. happened last night. I looked at that. I said, "Whoa, why are you taking this is critical? Why are we taking SEAL, right?" And the team, it's bigger than that, right? They're looking longer. They're tactical. So I think there's an amazing blend between leadership and coaching and talent in there. And your question is it talent or is it coaching, right? And great coaches develop talent. It's not one or the other. So yeah, Fiji. I think Fiji have got a huge amount of passion. I think they're playing for a much smaller, tighter cause. They're almost pioneering within their team. They're in a different stage, whereas South African team is on legacy and trying to build like a dynasty of rugby. Whereas Fiji are pioneering. They're trying to be the first Fijian team to make that semi-final. So I think they're in different stages of their lifespan as a team. And I've been looking at teams since I was a small little boy, and I always see this transition come out of pioneering into high performance, into legacy. And I think they're just at different stages, and you get a lot of passion when you're in the pioneering stage. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So Luke, I mean, you've got South Africa, who's got this great coach that played for the Springboks. He's got all the skill. He has this. I mean, I'm reading his book at the moment, Rusty's book. That's how intrigued I am with what he's doing. I think we need someone like that joining the ANC. Like personally, I think that we need someone unifying, because he's bringing not just a team together, but a country together. He is just, in my view, unbelievable. But us mere mortals, us normal business people, us normal CEOs, how do we transition? Or what are the things that we need to do to go into even a performance or a legacy culture? What are the first steps in your coaching journey?
Yeah, so at first, I mean, they often interview me more about sports coaching than about business coaching. And so one question that often comes up, Ralf, is how do you coach players? Okay, my answer is always the same. I don't coach players. I coach humans that like to play. Can you hear me, or am I lost here? Yeah, you can hear me, Han? Sorry, I thought I was frozen. So I coach humans that like to play. So we put the human at the center, do the same in businesses. So look at the humans that are there. Don't look at the players. My players are not machines to score goals for their team and to have a win. So if we put the human in the center, and if we treat them as humans with their background and showing them the future, and again, I repeat myself, as James said also, showing them the why they are doing what they're doing. And of course, Ralf, there is money. We all need only money. It's going to be short term. Why would I go the extra mile for the company? Okay? Take the money issue off the table and continue to grow and to inspire the people. So we hear a lot, Ralf, about coaching. What James and I talk a lot about is we use efficient imperfection. Okay, I see a lot of managers, leaders wanted to go to perfection, but we call it at that time inefficient perfection. So we use efficient imperfection. So you can go in our fast moving, growing times, you can't aim for perfection. I mean, I don't think James' race in London was perfect, but they still won it. So please, as leaders, use efficient imperfection and don't try to have perfection, because it's going to be inefficient often.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, I mean, we were just speaking earlier, and we're talking around I suppose, the ingredients of what it takes to be a good coach in a business, or how does your average Joe CEO or leader, how do they start becoming the Russies of the world? How do they start becoming the Lukes of the world, what are the things that they need to focus on? You mentioned their why.
Yeah, their why, and then a project. I see too many leaders that want to be charismatic leaders. Of course, it's great to have a charismatic leader, but next to the charismatic leader, I need a charismatic project. Because the leader might change. We see companies where people move from one company to another, but they need to keep this project. I mean, when Neil Powell stopped coaching the sevens, he said the culture of the team is going to be so strong that the new coach will adapt to the existing culture. So by creating a high performance, a winning, a legacy culture, you make sure that it's sustainable. Okay. And also, Ralf, leadership is what happens when you are not there. You know, so the leader, if he's got a great functioning team, I mean, James was training well and was training at the same intensity when the coach was not there or when the coach was there, because they know why they're doing it and they know what they want to achieve. So at that time, the leader can focus not only on what we call delivering today, making sure that we hit the KPIs of this month, this week, this quarter, this year, but that we can prepare the future. So leadership for us is 80% preparing the future, making sure that we're sustainable, 20% making sure that we hit the KPIs, that we, of course, South Africa wants to win this World Cup. But Rassi and Jacques Niebauer, they already preparing the rest. So another key ingredient for leaders, for coaches, look at the future and show the future to your teams. Energy comes from the future. Okay? When, for instance, we debrief a match, we always debrief in the future, never in the past. The French are probably debriefing what's happening yesterday night after they defeat. Hopefully, they don't say, guys, what should have we done to win the match? It's too late. They lost it. Guys, how can we use the experience of this match to prepare the next one? So leaders, please debrief in the future, never in the past. This project didn't work. What should we have done? No. How do we use this experience for the next one? Madiba said these amazing words. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. We change it and say always you learn. You learn more when you lose than when you win. So focus on progress more than on winning. How did we grow? How did we win? But for that, Ralf, another tip, use pit stops. We use the analogy of the pit stops. I mean, the Boks didn't learn anything yesterday on the pitch. They're too focused on winning. They will learn on the debriefing right after the match. You saw them together. They do a sport debriefing. Then hopefully they have a day of rest today. But tomorrow they will sit with the team. Guys, what went well, what didn't go well. So let's apply this in businesses. Often I see this rat race, maybe the hamster in the wheel. We turn, we accelerate, but nothing changed. So if you want to grow yourself, your team, stop, reflect on what you did and look at the future.
Sure. I mean, those are some very wise words there. And one gets the impression that having a culture and keeping it consistent, the team dynamics is going to keep that honest. But what happens if you're new to a company or you want to change a culture? And let's say you're not happy with the current culture. How difficult is that? Because I read the Whitey Basson, we talked about Whitey Basson earlier, but I read his book and he was the king of retailer and he'd grown ShopRite into Africa. And he was, asked several times to join other organizations. And he said, no, it's not, one person does not make success. It's a team. I would need to take my team do that. So how hard is it for a leader to, if they've got a struggling culture, if the mood's not right, if the performance isn't there, what are the steps that a leader needs to take then to make sure they surround themselves with the right people, the right team?
So at first, I mean, the answer is in your question. If you want to change the culture of a company, you need to change the mindset of the leaders. Sometimes company call me and said, look, we're a smaller company, about 60, 70 people, and we're going to work on culture. So I have all my team together. Please come and help us to redefine, to change the culture. I refuse. I said, no. If you want to work on culture, I need to have the leaders, the exco, the manco, whatever you call them. So if you want to change the culture of company, you need to change the mindset of the leaders. So that's work that you should not do by yourself as a leader, but your direct reports should help you to build the culture, to make the culture simple and visible. We always use this. Keep it simple, make it visible. James had one goal, winning gold. He can talk about it much better than I do, but winning gold in London. It was this one goal. If you look at James' videos, they repeat it. So they're well aligned on that. So align them on the goal, align them on the why, align them on the vision. Once this is done, Ralf, you need to look at leadership mindsets. You need to look at leadership behaviors. How do we behave? And at leadership actions, not only leadership for myself actions, but as a team. So that's how you build culture, mindsets, behaviors, and actions, and then you percolate this so that it speaks to the whole company. So it's the gravity. It's the law of the gravity that comes down and that percolates. I mean, if it comes from the bottom, it's not called change, it's called revolution. It comes from there. It's the Arab Spring. And so you don't want strikes or revolutions in your company, but build a great culture, and so that people feel that they belong to the company. Again, I repeat it, I don't know if it was heard before, be the best for the team, not the best
Of the team. And I mean, James, we spoke about it last time, but for individuals, there's this fear of managers micromanaging, and what does it take from Olympic athlete to grow your performance to get there? I mean, did you think at the beginning that you were going to win gold, or how did that journey sort of grow?
Yeah, I think people gravitate to an ambitious goal for sure, but they also gravitate to understanding what performance is. So in that change that you were just talking about in the previous question, people like I would create a high performance unit, and then put them on a pedestal and then align more people in underneath it. And that high performance core is the exco, right? It's the exco or the manco make that high performance, and they will gravitate towards what high performance is. And it's the same thing as an athlete, right? When we started, we were a bunch of 21-year-olds to 23-year-olds, naive with ambition. The South African team wasn't in a great space after Beijing 2008. And the sport was very unprofessional, and we had to take it through the transition out of this amateur world into a more professional setup. And there were a group of us who sort of formed the core of that, and it really gained momentum. The fear of micromanaging is, I think it's the biggest limiter to performance, right? This fear of being micromanaged. I'm going out there looking for feedback, right? Desperate for feedback. I come to the corporate world and there's hardly any feedback. And then people get it. And their first response is, I'm being micromanaged. Did your boss tell you how to write your email, to tell you that your email was worse, or to make it better? You've got two options. My boss is telling me how I have to write my emails, or the other way of saying that is my boss helped me write more professional emails. Right? It's the same input has resulted in those two mindsets. So if you are going out hungry for improvement and hungry for feedback, this micromanagement thing falls away quite quickly, in my view. And it's not always easy. Sometimes you have to take some hard pulls along the way about what you did wrong, but you get much better at receiving it.
Yeah. And I mean, you spoke that you should be measuring, because you, in your rowing, obviously you're measuring everything. I mean, when you told me that last time, I asked one of my colleagues, what do you think of this micromanaging and looking at the data and looking at the figures and reporting on them? And he said, the problem is I fear failing. That's why I don't really want to look at the data.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. This feedback that we are so afraid of, right? So as an athlete, we used to get every single Monday morning, we would get a physiological check, a psychological check, and then like a physical, how you're weighing, how fat you are, what your height is this week, because your height apparently sometimes changes one week to the next. You got all these physical checks, then you got a psychological check, how you're feeling. And I have no idea why that's not implemented in a corporate on a weekly basis. And then your third one is a physiological, you'll get on the ergo and get tested. That was just Monday morning by 9 o'clock. You had all these data points that came out of how you were doing. Then you had more tests in the week, and you had these feedbacks from your coaches saying, guys, we set out on a Wednesday morning to do X. Straight away, as we finished that piece Luke mentioned earlier, this is how that 90 minutes went, guys. We decided we wanted to do this. We got off the water and it felt more like this. We're taking all the data points all the time in trying to get to our ultimate goal of this why. The feedback loop is incredibly tight in sports, and that's, if you really understood the mechanics of your business, to get high performance people in there, I think you can really create a high performance team very quickly. But people seem to not want to spend the 10 minutes checking in with their teams on a digital level, right? I don't understand why we can't have, by 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, every person in your 60-person team has explained how they've slept in the last week, how they've felt at work, how they've managed their co-workers, how they feel, if they feel overwhelmed by the work volume, and you get an aggregated view of your team every Monday morning by 9 o'clock. That is absolute gold for me. And it's going to take each person of those 60 people 5 minutes, as opposed to doing that level of testing. So it's going to take half an hour of checking in on that once a year. What are you learning once a year? The data points are too far apart. So I'm very pro bringing in that data. Imagine you could flag the person who's sort of was your highest performer, who's suddenly not sleeping well, not happy at work. And now you can pull them aside and say, listen, but what's going on? Why is my best player in such a bad space at the moment? And you're going to learn that next week, not in 8 months' time. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Very low-key setup to pull it off. And I would die if I was a corporate boss, if I was a CEO of a 60-plus person, 100-person plus company, I would be looking to have that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the funny thing is that I mean, my watch does all that for me now. It tells me how I've slept. So I've got that personal information. I don't know if everybody's got watches like this. So and in a way, I feel like, am I being caring, or am I now overstepping and maybe getting too much data? Is probably my fear. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think as an athlete, I would have even felt intrusive having it like physically taken from my sleep, But as a bond built between my coach or the leader, and I think there's a lot of definition that needs to come in this space. Is it a coach? Is it a leader? Is it the boss? Is it the coach? But as my rapport builds with them, I know that giving the best input into the survey is the best for me. If I'm going through a personal thing and it's very personal, I've got no doubt. Maybe you just say, I really don't want anyone to know what I'm going through right now. And you put up a guard, right? And then your data is slightly skewed. But over 5 years, you're going to get some pretty good data. And you might even be able to start flagging when you're getting flagged incorrect data along the way. But the corporate athlete is putting forward that information, or the athlete, right, is putting forward that information. So and that bond slowly grows. And because it's so regular, and I think, I'm not sure if I told you the story before, but we once had an athlete break down in tears in the middle of his Monday morning questionnaire, because he was so in tune with how he had been answering those questions for the last 7, 8 years, right, at that stage, that he realized that his injury was actually beyond an injury and it was now a career-ending injury. And his motivation, he literally was answering the questions of where's his motivation this week. And he knew he had answered it. His motivation was down. His injury was too high. The pain he had been feeling in the last few weeks was too high. And he realized sitting there answering the question that it was over, right? His self-awareness of his injury became apparent in that question. So it's not only for someone else to answer the question, just you answering the question of how did I sleep last week?
Yeah.
It's more important than your watch knowing it, is how you perceive how you
feel it.
last
Yeah.
week. Yeah.
And so, I mean,
hugely valuable.
So obviously he realized he's failing. So how do you make room for someone to be so open about things like failing? I mean, how do you create that space for failing?
Yeah, it was the end of his career, right? So it certainly
I mean, the ultimate fail in a way, but he felt comfortable enough to tell you.
Yeah, his body had given up. Ultimately, his head hadn't, but his body had. And it's hard, right? When you've given something, but also along a career, what happens if you really are motivating people by their why and trying to bring people into a company, this more cause-based future that we're seeing in businesses with, the why really matters and the company's why. I mean, we also have to accept that when someone's why no longer aligns with the company's why, we will lose people along the way, right? But in the bigger picture, that's fine. So Matt got to the point where he still had the ambition, but his body couldn't go on any further. His back had really, it was the end, right? He had an op to keep him going and it just hadn't worked out. So the point is that he couldn't do the work anymore. And I think it's an interesting space that if we created workforces that were more in tune with how they were doing, we might lose people sooner along the way, but it would be for them to also go into the next phase of their life where they can recover. Because, Matt exited the team 4 years earlier than I did, and he went on his career and he moved on to the next phase where his body wasn't so aligned. And so as an individual, he was better off, but it took a great self-awareness of himself to be able to know that the time was up.
So, I mean, you're now a coach and you public speak and you were an athlete. So what is it? And if you could go back in time, what have you learned now that, I mean, you won a gold medal, so you've reached the accolade, but what lessons can you take from now being a coach and to implementing as an athlete? What would you learn?
I think I learned more and more about being an athlete and the things that we were good at as I see the corporate world a little bit more. I've learned the real, we used to think that the training program was very rigid, right? And that there was very little balance. But as I've spent less time in a very structured, routine-based environment, I learned the power of that, right? And how powerful it is. And it isn't something to necessarily want to be free of, as opposed to something that we should almost crave. Because I've seen how the world without routine is way less effective in a 3-year view or a 2-year view. So I would sort of embrace the routine with a little bit more openness as opposed to resistance. I think if I went back, and I think I would be more inclined to. We really did love the journey, right? But I think I would have been inclined to hang on another 4 years, potentially, knowing that we were really in something truly special back there, and finding that magic and finding that team dynamic is very difficult outside of the corporate world. Outside of the sporting world, it's more natural there. So I probably would have hung on another 4 years, not for the results by any stretch of the imagination, but just to spend another 4 years in that truly high performance environment. It's something that's quite hard. I've only been involved in potentially three high performance teams in my life. And they all seem to be quite short and fleeting compared to the 8 years I got in the rowing team.
Wow. So welcome back, Luke. I'm intrigued, right? Because in many ways, you've gone through the journey in sport and you're helping businesses you're coaching them to success. And James said earlier, there's not enough businesses that are doing it. So, we spoke about the why, and anyone that's read like Simon Sinek's book, Find Your Why, like I have, it's harder than you think. I mean, you start putting like revenue figures down or whatever. I don't know if James did it with his gold medal. I said I must reach a certain time. I'm not sure how. We spoke earlier and you talked around EQ, and it's something I've never really considered, and it was so clear to me that it was far more important than IQ.
So, Ralf, we see human beings, they all have a potential. And as you see, the potential is in the middle. And at first, you see human beings with a good IQ. If we look for players, the rugby players, it's their technical skills, how good they can shoot a penalty, pass the ball. At companies, it's what we call functional and organization skills. How good if you're in finances, how good you are there. We stretch that a lot. People get trainings on that. Next to that, you have the two other axes. The one is the EQ. So it's how emotionally strong am I, and how good as a team player am I. And then the third axis is logical for us in sports, is the physical quotient. So we call this the energy tripod. So the players have good mental capacities, technical capacities, emotional and physical. And we say you are as strong as your weakest axis. So it's a tripod. So if I put my players under pressure, it will go down via the weakest axis. And the weakest axis is my thumb here. So we stretch technically, emotionally, and physically. So we take these three as a holistic view. And on top of that, Ralf, we make a pyramid out of it. And we connect with the SQ. And once we make this as a pyramid, it's very stable. And the SQ is first, what is my why? And Ralf, it's never easy to find it, and it changes through your career. But we see the SQ as the backbone of an individual. And we start saying, who are you? Who are you? Where did you grow up? What's your background? Secondly, what's important for me? What are my values? Thirdly, it's what are my drivers? What energizes me? And fourth, what's my why? What's my legacy? What's my quest? Probably difficult to look over your whole life, but maybe we want to say in 3 years, what do you want to achieve? So that's my personal backbone, but we can also work on the company backbone. What's our unique selling proposition, our identity? Who are we? What are our values? What drives the company? And then again, what's the why? The quest. And so it's not my identity, my values, or my drivers, or my quest separately that makes who I am or who the company is. It's the combination of the four that makes your backbone really strong. So work on that, identify that. Again, as I said before, I don't know if it was interrupted due to the technical problems, but you need to stop to align on that as a company. And that's how, I think the aim of most of the companies is scalable and sustainable. And that's how you can make a sustainable team in the long term, by aligning on those elements.
Wow. And I mean, those 4 points are really some great takeaways. One of the things you talked about earlier is the future, is getting the business future thinking, and 80% of your time needs to be on the future. And I wonder how many people see the future to do that in the first place. And I think of someone like Elon Musk, and, he went into the electric car business, which is doing now well, but 10 years ago, he saw the future way before anybody else. And so I'd imagine he was able to drive people to that future and inspire them. How do business owners or business leaders in like legacy businesses, is there some tips or tools? How do you help when you're coaching them see that future? Is there a secret to it or an art?
No, probably no secret. But again, Ralf, when you coach top CEOs like we also do, you don't want to give them leadership tools or things like that. They all been to the big business schools like INSEAD, where we teach also, but you want to inspire them. You want to make sure that they can see the things on different angles. So when we coach top level CEOs, it's inspiring, it's challenging them and making them think about what could be the future. Like Peter Drucker said, the best way to predict the future is to create your own future. I mean, it's difficult, Ralf. The future doesn't exist. So when we future thinking, we're thinking about something that doesn't exist. So difficult for a CEO to create something that doesn't exist. But the CEO needs to have time, and we use a lot of metaphors. He's got a very full backpack, a CEO. So can I rely on my ExCo member to make sure that they deliver the KPIs so that I can spend time preparing a company that's going to be sustainable? I mean, you might be out of business like this just because somebody comes with a new technical tool or whatever, and your business is not relevant anymore. So if we don't spend time now preparing that, it might be difficult. So the person that I was talking this morning said the business is going very well. So it's difficult to say, hey guys, let's make sure we change. You're going to say, but Mr. CEO, everything works well. There's no burning platform. We are good. But it's at the moment when you are at your highest, that's when you need to ask yourself question. And that's the role of James and I and the other coaches of Mentally Fit, to inspire the CEO and to say, what do you need to change now to make your business sustainable and scalable? So it's this mindset change and this future forward growth mindset. I mean, continuous improvement. That's what we work on. We grow continuously and we can grow. I mean, probably James had a much better rowing boat in London than before. So there's the technical part that a lot of people can help you, but we work with the human parts, putting the human at the center and taking time to connect with the humans.
Yeah.
So Ralf, if I could jump in there, just the concept is, I've always spoken about setting your goal at the limit of your imagination. Right? And I think that's Elon Musk's imagination just goes a little bit further than most of us, right? So in order to then set amazing goals, you need to make sure it's set at the limit of your imagination, but you also need to expose yourself to bigger pieces of the puzzle, right? So, when he started making electric cars, that was crazy, right? I suspect he's starting to think about personal hovercrafts at the moment, right? And it seems crazy. It's a bit of a giggle now, right? But it's, for sure, Elon Musk's thinking about it because he's seen the full picture of the personal cars now, right? And he's also got the rocket piece, and for his imagination, that's something that's real. So how do we apply that into the rest of our lives? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we are setting audacious goals according to our imagination, right? But then it's also about getting exposure to grow your imagination. Because as South Africans, we sit in South Africa and our fish pond is a bit smaller than we like to think, right? It's about getting exposure into mentors and into people in bigger pieces of business, in the US market, in the European market, wherever it is, and making sure that you're investing in yourself to get to those spaces. And you've got mentors or coaches that are helping you grow your horizon, that your imagination grows a little bit. And you can get stretched, as Luke was mentioning earlier, right? You have to stretch yourself, stretch your imagination, stretch your horizons, so that you come back and you say, actually, my goal isn't on the limit of my imagination anymore. When I came through school, my goal was just to go to a world championship, right? I had no Olympic goal when I came through school. There were some guys ahead of me who had been to the junior world champs, and I just wanted to go there. They managed to go. We managed to get a medal. Then at that point, I was looking at senior world champs because that was the only place South Africans had performed. And then these guys called Ramon and Don Ramon, they got in Athens, 2004. They got themselves an Olympics bronze medal. And suddenly I was like, I want to go to the Olympics, and I want to do it like how they did it, from South African soil, right? They opened the mental passages, but at no point did we ever think bronze medal. You know, we were straight away thinking we want to go to the Olympics, and if they could get a bronze, we can get a gold, right? So it was just that little bit further in our imagination. By the time I retired, I wanted to do an unbeaten season, right? That was now where the limits of our imagination then was. We never got a drought, but that was our target in our last season. So you get the idea, right? That goal has to evolve, but you have to get exposure to, and you have to be stretched to really grow that imagination.
Yeah, I mean, Luke, I'd imagine that James went home one day to his family and said, "I'm going to go for Olympic gold medal," and there might have been some doubters in his family, and certainly in an organization, you got the same thing. You have audacious goals that a CEO suddenly finds himself on a retreat, and he's come with this audacious goal. And he comes to the office. He's watched Rassie turn the Springboks around. And guys, I mean, what are some of the I suppose the mistakes, or what are the principles for getting this right? Is this where a coach comes in?
Yeah, the idea is get everybody on board. Get everybody on board, make them dream. So at first, as leaders, you are storytellers. We see it a lot. So you need to tell stories to turn like a rational project into an inspirational, as I said, a charismatic project. Like we saw Kennedy in the 60s. I mean, they just wanted to prove with the race to the moon that America was much stronger technologically than Russia at that time. And so it was an imperialistic project. And Kennedy, in his speech, said, we're going to land a man on the moon and bring him back alive on Earth. Because Russians were before us, were ahead of us with sending Laika, a dog, but that burned coming back into the atmosphere. So it's this idea to get the people on board and to make them dream. What we use a lot, I mean, I can give you an example from the pitch. A lot of people are asking now, can we please do the closing of the year? Like James was doing after his Olympics. So first you do a closing and then you do a kickoff. So Tokyo Olympics, you close the book and you think about Paris Olympics, and the goal setting, you always have the rational goal, which are probably numbers. Next to the rational goal, what we do with our teams, we ask them, guys, we as an Exco Manco team, what would we be proud of end of 2024? What would we be ashamed of end of 2024?
Ashamed of?
Yeah, what are we proud and what are we ashamed? So the proud we stretch, and the shame we want to make it visible and clear. So guys, this is what we absolutely want to avoid. And Ralf, we make a gold pride, a silver pride, a bronze pride, and then we make a gold shame, a silver shame, and a bronze shame. And so we ask the people, let's identify it. Let's call it the pyramid of performance, and let's put it in there. Let's make it visible. Guys, which actions are we going to put in place to reach our goal and to avoid the shame? So I've never seen, I mean, leaders still make mistakes thinking people are going to be energized, excited by numbers. 2 billion, 1 billion, that number of customers. That's not what gets the people engaged, energized. It's when you speak to the heart, when you speak to the why. So that's why often we work with that. Of course, we need the numbers, but that's not what's going to drive the people. So these are tools that we use doing kickoffs of the season. I mean, I was in Kinshasa with another client in DRC, and we were closing Q3 and opening Q4. You can't play. I mean, the Springboks didn't play the same the first half and the second half. So in companies also, stop every quarter and make sure that the last quarter, for the guys that end the year in December, that you play it differently. That's the money time, we say in sports. The money time is your last quarter. How are we going to close the year? And it's a change of mindset there.
Wow. I mean, what I'm thinking is that most organizations need this sort of culture of coaching within them. And obviously you're a help to that. But James, you said no one's a natural rower. You have to learn to row. Are there natural coaches? Can you learn to coach?
Well, I think yes, you can definitely learn to coach, I guess, but I think there's some key takeaways that don't make great coaches.
Yeah.
I
was hoping you were going to say this.
There's so maybe a better way of saying it is, are there some people who aren't going to make great coaches?
Yeah.
I think it's quite an egoless environment. You need to make sure that where it fails is when the coach wants it more than the participant or the corporate athlete or the athlete can't want it more. Rusty can't want it more than the people on the field or the players on the field. They have to want it more. He's there to guide them. It's not his World Cup, it's their World Cup. And I think that's often I see in the schoolboy sport level, I see it all the time. You've got these coaches coming third, and the coach wants the team to win so that their CV looks better. We see that sadly in schoolboy sport all the time. I think you can definitely develop as a coach, and coaching is a skill, and as with anything, right? It's a muscle that but you have to be coachable to become a better coach. And I often talk about this concept of being coachable, right? And is someone coachable? And I think when you really get a good coach and athlete relationship, or corporate athlete for that matter, it really is someone who is open to the feedback and is really looking to get better, that growth mindset. So some people are definitely more coachable than other people. And even a coach has to be coachable, right? Has to find ways to get feedback about how they're coaching and can they develop further on. You mentioned there, like a company needs a culture of coaching. And I think that's definitely it, right? And if you have a leader who's open to coaching, and if the CEO is busy getting coaching, we often see them saying, we need this coaching. I've got a coach. I need more people below me, because they start seeing the value of having a coach. And whether that's, sometimes they've started with a life coach, and which is not what we do, right? But they get the concept of understanding coaching, right? And then they feed into more business coach into their business environment. So there needs to be an acceptance that how the coach fits in, and the value that an organization can really get by having someone who is an expert facilitator. If you think of Luke, how many teams he sat with for a day and done a team coaching exercise, put 25 people in a room and get them aligned. The reality is your team only needs to do that once a year, twice a year. That alignment around the goal isn't it every week. This isn't something the CEO needs to be good at, right? There are 100 things that the CEO does every month, every week. He needs to be really good at that, and that lower threat. But that facilitation, why wouldn't you get a coach to facilitate that session? You don't need to have that skill permanently in your team. And it's very hard to have it at every layer, at your exco, at your manco, at your board. Why wouldn't you just get a facilitator, a team coach, to come in and make sure we align around our goal? It's still your goal, right? We only facilitate you towards your team's goals. We can't make the goal up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking to an Olympic rower here, but Luke always seems like the Olympic coach. I suppose, the thing that maybe concerns me a little bit about coaching is that it can be taken away. An organization might get behind it because of what they see could happen, and then things don't happen quickly enough. How do you manage that expectation, and what is the expectation of successful coaching?
So here we can talk about one-to-one coaching, because we have different jobs, James and I, and it's all, we put it under the umbrella of coaching. But at first is the one-to-one coaching. So where we coach people for an hour and a half, mostly it is online. The second one is the team coaching that James talked about. Okay, we have teams and we facilitate around an objective. The third one is team training. So we train people. So for instance, with some of our clients, we have a training program like you would go to a business school to train your managers to be better leaders. Okay, that's more transfer of knowledge that we have. And the last one, which James and I are also doing a lot, is keynote speaking, inspiring people. But so for all of them, Ralf, we align on objectives. So when we start, if I had to start one-to-one coaching with you, Ralf, we would align around 3 objectives. Where does Ralf need to grow? Gold, silver, and bronze. Always the magic 3. Don't put more than that. We would check that, Ralf. I don't know, I know it's your company, but if you have a CEO, if you had a CEO, we would ask him in the meeting and said, listen, Ralf needs to think he needs to grow here and there. Yeah. Can you confirm, or do you have other ideas? We would continue the coaching, and probably after 3-4 sessions, we would call your CEO in again and say, did Ralf evolve in there? Are the objectives still the same, or do they need to be changed? And then, of course, at the end of the session, we never coach more than for a year and 10 sessions, because we want to create independency, not dependency. So the sooner Ralf would say, look, I'm done, or James, I'm done, I have the tools, the better job we will have done. So at the end, we just realign on the objectives. If we put that into team coachings, the most important question that we always ask, what would you like to reach with your team? And can we put a KPI, a key performance indicator next to it? And that's what we will keep in mind. So what's the objective? What do we need? I mean, we're not there, coaches, just to have a nice talk. If the person said, hey, you know what? It was a nice talk, we lost. We are there to help them to perform better, to stretch them so they can perform better, the team can perform better. Although, I mean, I had a lot of discussion this European summer with my colleagues. And for energy for performance, what we were doing, we now are to energy management to balance delivery and recovery. Ralf, I mean, people are too stretched now, so they need to have a nice balance, performance, delivery, but also recovery. So it's really important that we look at the recovery and that we look through self-care. How do I take care of myself? People care. How do I take care of the individuals in my team? And team care. And we do this, of course, using sports metaphors. So, but put the people in the center, align on objectives for coachings, and make sure that you do it through self-care, people care, and team care. I mean, Rassi needs to have you seen how much now it's going to be a week in between every match? I come more of a hockey culture or soccer. I mean, World Cup. Yeah. They play more matches in a week. The rugby with the intensity, now the Springboks are going to focus on recovery. So ask yourself, in your company, how much time do I give to the people to recover? Often in keynotes, we say recovery is part of your salary. And we see the people going like, and taking notes. I mean, James was paid to recover as an Olympic athlete, us as a corporate athlete. How much time do we take for our personal recovery so that we're energized and that we can get these gold medals for our company?
So that's interesting, right? So you're saying that employees are paid to recover. So look after yourself on the weekends or during the week, because tomorrow you've got to show up the full you. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Recovery is part of your salary. James, maybe do you want to talk about your Olympic experience?
I'm paid as an athlete. I'm paid to perform. I cannot perform if I don't recover. I'm paid to be the best in the world and to have the highest output I can. It's very similar to a business world. You're paid to deliver output, to think, to perform as high. That is an impossible task to deliver if you're a zombie. So the first and foremost thing you need to do is recover. You speak to athletes who've been at it for 20 years or 10 years. What do I know at the end of my career? I didn't know at the beginning of my career how to recover better. I would have learned how to recover. I would have learned how to, these guys are traveling with their own recovery staff. Some of these guys, even in teams, NFL, you start seeing these guys who they say they're spending $2 to $3 million a year on their personal recovery, right? Now, that's what they get to. That's where they keep advancing their performance. In corporate, they say, cool, I work all-nighters. Hang on. There's no ways I could. I'm a bit behind on my deadline for this year's World Champs. I'm just going to row through the night. It doesn't really work like that, right? And then you're a zombie the next day. So yes, you are absolutely paid to recover. You are paid to be at your highest performing level, particularly the CEOs earning big cash, right? Is you are paid to perform at a high level. So you need to start looking after yourself. Just this week, I finished an event I've been involved with, and I spoke to one of the guys heavily involved there, and he's going back to getting his mind back into the business that he's a CEO of. And he said, I've got to start looking after my personal health. I'm not able to perform at work anymore, right? So we have to realize that these two things are linked. And if you neglect your physical health and your recovery, your performance will wane and your job will suffer. So yeah, you are paid well to look after yourself.
What happens if you're not paid well? What if you think I'm not paid well enough, so I'm going to have work hard and play hard? What happens in that situation? Is that a challenge of the why, Luke?
I don't know, James. Do you want to go?
If your goal is to perform, it's not really the remuneration, right? If you are wanting to be better at your job, if that is your goal, if your goal is different to wanting to be better, then it's a different conversation. Right? If you just want to go through the world and run over, but if you have a performance mindset and a growth mindset, which I would assume a lot of your listeners do, then it's a case of saying, well, it doesn't matter if I'm paid badly, I need to recover, I need to perform even more to get out of this badly paying situation and into a place where, and it's not a remuneration, right? It's about performance. And if I'm not able to perform at a high enough level, I need to understand why and stretch myself into the right space. And recovery, it's not a case of working through the night. I think a lot of people fall into that trap, particularly when they're young. They work through the night to be able to hit the deadline. Cool, but why are we chasing the deadline in the first place? That's we need to backtrack about a week back potentially.
And I would maybe like to add, Ralf. I see often a lot of companies that we work with, they still participate to best place to work or best employer. I think we should change that to best place to thrive, best place to grow. I mean, youngsters, they come into your company and they ask you how I'm going to learn and grow. A lot of the things that they learned at university are outdated when they start working. So you need to have people and you need to grow them in your company so they can grow, so you can grow. If your people don't grow, there's no room for you to grow. So that you can start doing other things. And probably you and most of the listeners know the 70-20-10. How do I learn? 70% on the job. Again, leaders, coaches, give feedback because 70% on the job, only 20% is social interaction. Again, difficult. We're still in South Africa, very remote working. So the social interaction is less. So that's why also a lot of clients ask us, please, look, we all work remote. Can we do a team coaching? And a big part of the team coaching is people reconnecting and reconnecting as humans. Okay, and only 10% is the formal learning training. So maybe, I don't know where this fits, this podcast, Ralf. Is it formal learning? Is it social interaction? It's maybe not feedback on the job.
Yeah, I think this is feedback on the job for leaders. This is exactly what it is. But wow, it's been, I mean, we could go on forever because it's obviously the topic very close to my heart. But I want to thank you both for your time. I'd love to get you back in one of our events. We've got the Future of HR, which is happening next month, but which is a conference for a lot of HR leaders and business executives. But it was absolutely amazing to have you both on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's awesome to have been with you.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ralf. Sorry for my technical problems that I had, but I mean, as you can hear it's our passion at Mentally Fit to inspire leaders so they can grow their business, so they can grow South Africa, so they can grow Africa and take everything to the next level. My personal why is to get the best out of every person. And so we can all continue to grow. But thank you. We'd love to participate to the HR, how do you call it? HR Summit?
Future of HR, yeah.
Future of HR or any other occasion where we can inspire and help people to develop and to be better.
Yeah, for sure. I think our purpose is to inspire the world to do good business. So part of this is good business, right? Coaching and being coached as teams that's good business. So yeah, it was really amazing. And I think, on a personal note, I'd love to see how, I can reach out to you in the future to do some coaching. So, I spoke to the team earlier, especially the sales team, and said that they should be listening in on this because I think there's some work you could help us with as well. So really, really found it valuable. And I was excited with this podcast. And thank you so much for all your pearls of wisdom. It was really great having you guys on board.
Thank you. And Ralf, if I may, you can find us on our website, mentallyfit.co.za, if you want more information, or just reach out. We're very active on LinkedIn. You can find James, myself, or my colleagues on LinkedIn and pop us a message, and we'll be quick to answer.
Yeah, I saw James is on there winning rowing events again. So yeah. Lovely. Thank you, guys.